M. Bombay cigars represent the most admired cigar culture of Cuba. They select the best of the best quality tobacco to use in the aging process. M. Bombay cigars are then rolled in Costa Rica by some of the most experienced cigar rollers, giving it a unique smoking experience. The band portrays the detailed and artistic nature of our small industry. Try the M. Bombay Casera, M. Bombay Mora, and the recently released M. Bombay Habano. M. Bombay cigars, where the cigar is a way of life. If you created the Aging Room Small Batch Cigar line, the highest rated boutique cigar brand of our times, what would you do next? Well, if you're Rafael Nodal from Boutique Blend Cigars, you would combine your three most important passions of your life, Cuba, music, and cigars, and create a new classic, La Boheme Cigars. La Boheme is Rafael's take on the golden age of Cuban cigars. La Boheme is a sophisticated blend of extra-aged and hard-to-find tobaccos from the Dominican Republic. A medium-bodied cigar, rich in flavors reminiscent of the island he left 35 years ago in a small boat with his family. Why wait for the embargo to be lifted? Smoke La Boheme today. Blending is in our DNA. Saga Cigars, makers of the Saga Golden Age. The Golden Age is a cigar that takes you back to the classic days of cigar smoking. Through the 6 generations of experience by the Reyes family, the Saga Golden Age delivers a timeless blend that uses the nobility of the tobacco to bring you the perfect balance of power and flavor. It narrates better than words the history of a family's tradition in tobacco, delivering a cigar much like the ones they used to smoke in the times of Hemingway. Saga Golden Age is a full-bodied, full-flavored Dominican Puro. With tobaccos from one farm, the blend features a Corojo 2006 wrapper and filler from original Cuban seeds grown in the Dominican Republic. Available in 4 sizes at an affordable price, the Saga Golden Age is sure to please and take you back on a journey to yesteryear.
Brought to you by Rocky Patel Premium Cigars. The era of elegance continues as they celebrate 20 years of creating iconic cigars, delivering nothing short of magnificent. The Rocky Patel 20th Anniversary Cigar line follows the lineage of the Rocky Patel Decade and 15th Anniversary. 4 years in the making, it's a masterfully crafted cigar. The blend combines fillers from Esteli and Jalapa, Nicaragua, as well as Yamastran, Honduras. Encompassed in an elegant Honduran wrapper, this box-pressed beauty is soon to be legendary. The Rocky Patel 20th Anniversary, the era of elegance continues. For more information, visit them on the web at rockypatel.com and be sure to follow Rocky Patel Premium Cigars on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Stogie Geeks Show. I'm, of course, your host, Paul Sedorian, joined on the lines via Skype by Mr. Will Cooper. And we've got a special guest for you on this segment. Charles Rutherford from Boveda joins us. Welcome, Charles.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yes, it's wonderful to have you on the show, Charles. I think it's very timely, as Will and I have been talking this week specifically. Timely to have you on the show because Will and I have been talking about the struggle that we've been having in our humidors to keep them properly humidified and keep our cigars from drying out. We went from a very sharp contrast in weather from it being somewhat humid to being very, very dry. Which is detrimental to a lot of your cigars for a whole lot of reasons. So I'm glad you're here with us this evening.
Well, hey, I'm glad that I joined you. Sorry for leaving you stranded last week. It was totally my bad. So thank you very much for giving me a second shot at it. I hope to redeem myself tonight.
No, it's okay. Like, believe me. In everything that Will and I and all of us have done here in the Stogie Geeks, we've all made scheduling mistakes, certainly. So
it happens.
Yeah, no harm, no foul, dude. No, totally cool.
All right, good.
So, Charles, tell me how you kind of got your start in the cigar industry and into the, humidification aspect of it.
Yeah, I'm in my 5th consecutive year, or my 7th non-consecutive year being with Boveda. I came back about 4 years ago, but a little known fact is that I was one of their first salesmen back in 1997 when my office was a door on top of 2 filing cabinets in Sean Knutson's living room. And so he had somebody over in the kitchen, he had somebody downstairs, and we were sending out what you guys might remember were the very first humidor bags, and my job was to send those puppies out and make a couple hundred rather phone calls a day to people that had gotten them in their hands. And so it was a little bit by accident. I had left Boveda after a couple, of course, Humidipack back then, but I'd left after a couple of years to go and pursue a professional motorcycle racing career that I did for about 4 years before that ended in injury. And then I went and did a bunch of other things. And then Boveda came to mind, and I happened to come back at a really good time. And I love it. I love what I do. It's a thrill getting to help and work with people in their passions, because as you very well know, the reason that I'm here is for cigars. But what people know a little bit less is that we're also in music, we're in food, electronics, medical devices, and to a growing degree, we're also in cannabis. So I get to work with people that are doing things in places that they love, and it's just a thrill to be able to do that each day.
Wow, there's a lot in that in those statements right there, Charles. It's interesting how in your career sometimes you come full circle, right? Like I've worked in technology for a long time, and I've smoked cigars for a long time since I was in college. And it's interesting how you come full circle in your career. I think you've done way more interesting things in your career than I have. Certainly, motorcycle racer is way more interesting than I think Will and I have done in our careers. Unless there's something you're not telling me, Will, but
I've done nothing interesting.
I've done nothing interesting like that. Like I've been in like software and technology for my entire career. So props.
Well, I
to
tell you
Charles.
what. Yeah, well, thank you very much. I wouldn't have mapped it out this way, but I am thrilled with where I'm at. I don't take it for granted. I'm a blessed man, and I love the people that I work with. I love the subjects, and it doesn't hurt when you've got a world-class product, right? And that you're the only one that can do what you do. So that doesn't suck either.
Well, it's interesting, Charles. When you say when you first worked for the company, like you were making 100 sales calls a day, and I have so much admiration for people who start in any industry and are just really passionate about the product that they have and are really trying to make inroads to get sales, to get their product traction, and are making all those phone calls and just trying to get their product to market. I have a business degree, and so I have a lot of admiration for how much work that is and to how scary that can be, right? Because, do you know if you're going to make it or not? And it's just great to see a company that you work for today that has really made some great inroads into the cigar industry. I wasn't aware of all the other industries that you're in, but that's really great to see.
Well, thank you very much. And it's very little because of me, but more so with Sean and Tim, who for the time that I was gone, I mean, that was the really hard time. And don't forget that Sean and Tim left very, very successful careers in order to take this leap. And so they had the buy-in of their families. And there wasn't, although they were successful in building the business each year, it took a long time. It takes a long time to get a business to a spot where you feel like, okay, at least I can catch a breath while I still keep pushing this huge sled up a hill.
Yeah.
So if it weren't for, and you got to remember too, that Boveda was coming into a space where people thought forever that the sponge was going to be as good as you could do, or a different method of holding water and it evaporating was as good as you could do. And so there was, when you invent an industry, when you invent something, it's a tougher push because you've got to tell people what the heck this thing is. And it's almost as though it is, people looked at it skeptically because this can't really be true. This can't really be doing what they're claiming that it can do. So
Charles, it's interesting. We're talking business right now, which is totally fine, which I think is great. And creating your own market is one of the most difficult things to do in business. But I can't say how much appreciation I have for companies like Boveda that have created this market and gotten people away from that nasty green foam sponge that they're sticking in their humidors, right? And going to something that is a two-way system. I'm not saying that just to sheerly promote your product. That's something we've talked about from like episode 1 here on the Stogie Geeks, 4 years ago, that we're like, that's not the way to go to properly humidify your cigars. It's just, it's not a viable solution for the problem that you have of keeping your cigars at a static humidity level.
Yeah, and I was a poster child, Charles, because I made the mistake of using the foam about a year ago, and created one of the worst mold problems I ever had. So we've talked about it extensively on that show. To say the least. Yes.
Well, I'm glad that you're on the Boveda train, Will.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, in two-way humidification, Charles, has been something that, we've promoted from day one here in the Stogie Geeks. It's something that, as we've progressed as cigar smokers, right, we've realized that, and I think it's largely from Will and I both, and a lot of us in the industry that have a background in technology, are like, there's a better way to solve this problem. And technology is a way to solve this problem. And to have a two-way humidity system that works is something that we all appreciate. So, I think it's like Boveda and really kind of embodies what we see as technology that helps us as cigar smokers, right? We're all passionate in the cigar industry as cigar smokers about a hobby. And one of the things that we have to fall back on is technology to make sure that our cigars are humidified perfectly all the time.
Yeah, we look at ourselves as a technology company, and it's not super sexy, but the things that it protects are very sexy. And so, I kind of look at it as though if you had a cigar company on with you right now, if I was that guy, they would be talking about how great their cigar is, and they might, but they might stay away from claiming that it's the best cigar in the world, because how do you judge that, right? It might be subjective for a lot of people, even though they might agree in a lot of areas. So it puts us in a strange spot a little bit when we're talking like this, where everyone's going to, of course, pump the product that they work for, right? But the objective reality is that Boveda is the only way that you can count on adding or removing humidity and being stable even after it's given up or gained moisture. Because the items that are out there now, you can get them to start at a certain humidity level by just mixing the right amount of glycerin or the right amount of glycol with water. You can get it to start at any humidity level from basically 5% to 95%. So to some people that looks like, wow, that's what's going to happen with my cigars too. But what they don't understand is that once that ratio, that very careful ratio changes, the humidity level that thing gives off, wherever it started, is going to change. And so that's what I think sometimes claims and marketing can, people I think want to generally trust what they're hearing. And when you see that on a jar or a container, why wouldn't you trust that? And so, especially when you put it in put a calibrated hygrometer in there, you say, oh wow, this is really reading 70%. But what becomes painful is to learn, like Will just talked about, is that when you add more water to it, or when you add some cigars that are a little bit more moist than you'd like, it changes that ratio, and then that humidity level that it gives off spikes, and then you've got a mold problem. So the way that I usually put it to people is the objective reality is that Boveda is the only company in the world that manufactures an all-in-one hygrometer calibration kit. Nobody else suggests using anything, maybe until tomorrow, to anything else to calibrate a hygrometer. You won't see that on any other product. And so we make the only hygrometer calibration kit. And your last sponsor there, Rocky, I think that cigar box is one that you'll find Boveda in. So the second objective reality that you can tell that Boveda performs unlike anything else is that it's the only thing you're going to find in the boxes of the world's leading brands.
Yeah, in fact, Charles, I just picked up a box of the alternate store cuts, and they were in there.
Yes.
Henry Clay, yep.
You are going to notice that Altadis launches us into just about every one of their lines.
Yeah. And I took
You beat us to the press release, Will, but I'm glad that you were the one that did it.
Yeah, that's Will. That's Will. That's why one of the reasons, just one of the reasons why we love Will so much.
Yeah, no, I mean, do you do the ones for Fuente? Because Fuente's been doing it for a long time.
I was going to ask that, Will.
Yeah, we absolutely do. That's the first one that we had. It's also the only one that we private label. We tried to private label for a number of other companies since then, but you can imagine what it's like being in the middle of wars or discussions on art. And so we did that for a few people, and what it turned out is that the companies that were doing it, except for Fuente, who has built really parts of their brand around it, is that cigar customers were looking at this pack kind of skeptically, going, what the heck is this? Because this isn't what X company does. That's Boveda's job. And so people were missing the fact that it was Boveda, even though there was a small logo
Charles,
on it.
yeah, that's interesting because I've bought several Fuente boxes that have that pack inside of them. And I never realized that it was Boveda that was doing that. And it's kind of interesting. I kind of use it as a gauge, right? And I think it's important for the consumer to realize that when you buy a somewhat high-end box of Fuente cigars, whether it be, their annual release of their holiday pack or their God of Fire or their Opus X, and it has this little pack in it, a couple of things go through your mind as a cigar smoker. You're like, is this thing going to explode or, ruin my cigars? And once you get past that and understand that now it's Boveda, so that's not going to happen, and you're like, it's kind of like a gauge, so that if this pack is dried out, it means that I probably need to humidify these cigars because this pack has dried out inside of them. So it's a great gauge to understand because in that cigar box's lifetime, it may go through various humidification systems, and it's a great gauge to understand, are these ready to smoke or not?
You're absolutely right. And the funny thing that your fans might not know is that providing humidity was less of a concern for Fuente. Mm-hmm. Their concern was packaging on a day that was too wet.
Yes.
And so that's why we are the only solution out there for that, because they don't have real control over that. You can imagine how bad of a deal it would be to package something that's too wet and then hope that it's okay when it gets to the end user. Yeah. So the Boveda pack then is absorbing that excess moisture, and then that gives it more capacity to give water to the cigars during transit. So if you open a box that does have a dry Boveda in it, that puppy was working really hard
yeah,
to make sure that the cigars still got to you in as good a condition as they could be. So it could happen where, the distribution channel for anybody, no matter how well they do it, is going to have some uncertainty. And the Boveda pack is just an insurance policy against that, because once it leaves their dock, there might have a climate-controlled plane. They might have climate-controlled spots along the way, but there's no chance if you get delayed on the sea or you get delayed on the UPS truck in the middle of Miami or the middle of Phoenix, you are at the mercy of what's happening in there unless you've got a Boveda pack in there working its hardest to add or remove to keep that moisture content of the cigars correct. So
yeah, and Charles, you bring up a great point, because so much of what I think the kind of anxiety points are for cigar smokers like Will and I and a lot of the people that listen to the show is temperature, right? And temperature is, I think, underestimated, and it can be your enemy, I think, more so than your friend, right? And living here in the Northeast in the winter, it is so much our enemy, right? Because as that temperature plummets, so does the humidity. And that's why I think it's so important to include Boveda type packs in your cigars when you ship them, because when that temperature plummets, man, so, as you know, so does that humidity. And it's so important to keep your cigars in a state where they're still smokable. I really get concerned as humidity decreases and temperature causes humidity to decrease, that those oils are drying up, and that's going to ruin the experience in my cigars.
Yeah, and it can happen fast too. I mean, when you put that cigar down in your ashtray, when you're done, you come back and you know how wet it is. You come back in 2 hours, it's going to be pretty dry.
Yeah.
So if you're shipping cigars, even in a Ziploc bag will slow down the moisture transfer a little bit.
Hmm.
But when it's I say out of a humidor, but humidors don't themselves provide moisture. It's only as good as the humidification you're using. So once you take a cigar out of a properly humidified environment and just put it in a bag and hope that it's going to be good over the course of 2 or 3 days, that has got measurable moisture loss that will, if you tested it, have, like you said, a loss of the oils, a loss of the sugars, a loss of the flavor. Now, you might not tell each time, but it's happening, and you are missing something. And so I know, and I'm convinced that so few people, I mean, Boveda customers being the people for sure, but outside of that, so few people get to experience a cigar exactly the way that the master blender intended. And you can really only do that by keeping a stable, proper humidity level. And oh, hey, guess what? Boveda does that.
Yeah, and one of the things I appreciate about Boveda packs is they're kind of like and I don't know if this was the intended use for your company, Charles, that you work for, but I kind of use them like the canary, right? So I'll put them in a Ziploc bag with cigars in my humidor. I'll put them in a box that's in my humidor. I'll put them just directly in my humidor, and I'll go check them every once in a while. And after some time, like if they still got a lot of moisture left in them, I'm like, maybe my humidity is too high. And, if they're in the top of my humidor in a box, I'll check it after a little while, and I'm like, wow, the edges are kind of hard, which means it's been emitting a lot of humidity. Like maybe my humidity is too low. Is that like a use case that you have seen to use it as kind of like a gauge as to whether or not your humidor is performing correctly or not?
Well, I think we're getting into an area here where I might be unusually candid from some of the perception that I see that relates to your question. Because people seem to think they trust Boveda enough to do the fine tuning, but
Yes.
they don't seem to trust it enough to do the heavy lifting. And so we get it all the time where, hey, I'm having a problem in my humidor. Okay, great. What are you using? Well, I'm using 2 of your 69 packs. How many cigars does your humidor hold? Well, it holds 100. Okay, you're using half as many as the minimum that we recommend because we only recommend minimums. There is no maximum. You can't use too much. It's impossible.
Right,
It knows
right.
when to stop. So somebody will tell us, I'm using 2. We say you should be using 4, and they go, well, I've got a jar of gel in there too. You go, well, okay. The jar is giving off super high humidity, 80,
Yeah.
90 plus, and the Boveda packs are trying to save your cigars from that. So it's not going to average. The Boveda is going to try to eat the higher humidity, right? That's what they do. And then once they've absorbed everything that they can, your humidity is still high. And so I feel like it comes kind of from an area of cost, right? Because you can spend less money to humidify your humidor than you would spend on Boveda, but you can't spend any less money and get two-way humidity control. So
Right.
what I suggest to people is, listen, you didn't spend small money for your humidor or for your cigars, and so just use one of those per 25 cigar capacity. Even if your humidor isn't full, it's still space and wood that needs to be conditioned. Use one per 25, and you're going to get a kind of life out of them that is going to shockingly impress you. So it's not uncommon that people kind of use it as a canary or do the fine tuning. But listen, let Boveda do the heavy lifting. Excuse me. Let Boveda do the heavy lifting. One per 25. I mean, in a 100 count humidor, you might spend, what is that, $16 every 4 months to
Yeah,
keep it humidified. And so when people say, but gosh, Boveda is expensive, I said, no, Boveda is not expensive. ruining your cigar. Ask Will what ruining your cigars or ruining your humidor and how expensive that is.
Yeah, and it was good stuff that was, I talked about a lot. I had some really good stuff, and it was just,
Yeah,
it
I
was
mean, you
my
lose
laziness that prompted
but
that.
Will, right? You lose 4 sticks that are $10, like that's $40 right there. So, Charles, I think your point is extremely valid.
Yeah. I mean, there was a $35 cigar I lost. So right then and there,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was like, wow, I should have just thrown it in there. I had
Mhm.
it lying around. I said, I'll use that foam thing. Never again. Never.
I have a theory, and I would love to find out on Twitter or our Facebook page the candid response from your fans. I'm convinced that some guys don't want to use Boveda because they like to tinker. And we've removed one option for them to tinker. They don't have to think about their humidor anymore. They're on our auto ship program and it just shows up whenever they want it, and that's their signal to change them. Maybe they are buying them from a local store, hopefully, and they happen in there and say, oh, maybe I need to bring home some packs. Maybe it's an escape from the wife. Maybe it's because you like to tinker. I don't know, but I would really love to hear whether your readers like to tinker even if they don't have to tinker anymore.
Yeah, but I would agree with you, Charles. I think, if you add Boveda packs to your humidors, that it takes away some of that variance, right? It takes away, like, oh, I'm traveling and I'm kind of nervous that my humidity is going to drop too low or go too high. Whereas if I add Boveda packs, it takes away that like kind of nervousness. So I think it kind of works in the opposite way, where it can take away some of your anxiety about your humidor, because it is that two-way system, which is so important. Because living here in the Northeast, Charles, I mean, in the winter, like the humidity in my house is 20%, right? And then you switch to the summer and it's 100%. And like you said, there's a lot of tinkering that is associated with that. And Boveda helps kind of like reel in the reins on some of that tinkering.
There's a little bit that might happen because we experience those same swings in Minnesota. So in the winter, it's not uncommon that you need more horsepower. And that horsepower can come in the form of another Boveda pack because, again, what some of your readers might not completely know is that no matter how good a humidor is, there's an LA Blue sitting about 7 feet from you right now, and that sucker is amazing. But that still has moisture migrating through not only the seals, but also through the walls, through the top, through the floor, okay? So humidors are built to breathe, and part of that reason is because the humidification devices that existed before Boveda can only give off high humidity. So you needed something that didn't seal completely well,
Right.
so that the air that exchanged would basically be lowered down to an area that wouldn't immediately ruin your cigars. So that's the kind of thing that we're working with here in humidors, where Boveda works great. But Boveda works really great if you've got the same number of packs in a container the size of your humidor made out of plastic, for example. So humidors are fantastic. They look a heck of a lot better than a Tupperware sitting on your counter. But some folks, I would almost recommend, if it's really tough and maybe your humidor isn't really great and you've added a couple extra Boveda packs and it still can't keep up, I might almost suggest moving them to Tupperware or to plastic or something like that, maybe a cooler, because they don't absorb moisture, they don't leak moisture like wood. But I haven't seen that happen very many times. Usually what we suggest, and people get back to us with great results, is either use the same number of packs at a higher humidity level or use extra packs. And I usually suggest using extra packs because once that weather rechanges, for example, if you're using 75s because it's super dry in your house when 72s usually do it, well, once it turns, 75 is going to be too high for your cigars. So I'd rather that somebody use more of a certain humidity than a higher humidity to achieve a certain number.
No, that's really sound advice. Charles, I want to talk about in your travel humidors. And I think that's really a great use case for Boveda. And even if my travel humidor has some kind of humidification system, I always, and I sound like a commercial for your product, right? But it's so true. Like I'm taking some of my prized possessions, my prized cigars with me when I travel, even if it's to my local cigar shop, even if I'm putting it in my bag, even if I'm going to take a few sticks from my humidor that's, downstairs in my basement and it's in the summer and I'm smoking a lot of cigars outside. I'm stuffing it in my travel pack and, keeping it on my counter for a couple days or a week or more. I know that if I put a Boveda pack in there, that it's going to maintain humidity nicely for my cigars in my travel packs. And I think it's such an awesome use case for your product.
Yeah, that is one of the places that we absolutely shine. I mean, I have an Armador or a armored humidor in my golf bag, and I haven't seen it since. Well, I saw my golf bag once in December, if you can imagine that, in Minnesota.
Yeah,
where I did.
We had some warm days in December too. Yeah, here in New England. Yeah.
But the last time I pulled a cigar out of it was probably October. Now I'm going to go back into that bag here, and there are cigars in it. I'm going to go back into that bag here in March, and those cigars will be perfect because there's a 60-gram Boveda pack. It's 60 gram.
Yeah.
So it's this big, and the humidor is this big.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it can't be overstated to your fans that you don't have to worry about using too much Boveda. It's impossible. The more you use, the longer it'll last. So although you could get away with one of our small packs, which we call the 8-gram,
Mm-hmm.
you could throw a 60-gram in there and replace it once every year or every couple of years versus an 8-gram, which you might replace every couple months depending on how often it's open and closed. So that is a great use case, and that's not something that you can do reliably with something that you have to refill, because something giving off really high humidity in a completely sealed case like plastic can be really dangerous.
Charles, one of my concerns, and I have to be honest, and this is like the skeptical technology guy in me, the kind of computer security hacker in me, because that's the area that I play in. I was like, I'm putting this Boveda pack in it feels kind of liquidy, right? And I'm throwing it in my travel pack, or I'm throwing it in my humidor, or I got a 30 count one and I'm going to Vegas for a week for a conference, and I'm really concerned that this pack is going to bust open. Like I'm going up in an airplane and the pressure is going to be really high, and then I'm going to a dry desert and there's a lot of variance in temperature and humidity. Like I'm really concerned that this is going to break open on my cigars. Now, to your credit, obviously, I've used these for several years and I've never had that happen to me. But it's still, as kind of like a skeptical consumer technology person, I'm afraid that these packs are going to break open. What can you tell us about your technology that makes these packs so reliable?
Well, I can tell you a little bit about the process and then give you a good example of why they wouldn't need to worry about that. So when these Boveda packs are born and they roll off the Boveda production line, we have 200% quality control. So we have 2 people that each press down on every single Boveda pack that's made. And 2 people do that to make sure that it's not leaking. And from there, then it's packaged so that we know that there's 2 sets of hands, 4 total hands that have pressed on these things to make sure that they're okay. Excuse me. So a leaker is exceedingly rare. Can it happen? Yeah. We've got a fluid-filled pack that
Right.
oftentimes needs to make a long trip to somebody, and it might be thrown, dropped, squished, or slammed, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if your viewers want to go to YouTube and look for Boveda Inc., they find our YouTube page. And about a week ago, 10 days ago maybe, I published a video of me standing on a 60-gram pack and an 8-gram pack. So you can literally stand on these, and can I recommend it? No, but what I can say is that I could do that to any single Boveda that rolls off the line. You'll even see my boot footprints in it. Don't make fun of my scarf, though, because some guy that saw the video thought that I looked like a girl in the video. I'm sure them.
Charles, YouTube comments, God, I've been in technology a long time.
Yep.
Believe me, dude, I've dealt with the trolls.
Yep.
We're just going to discount that. Believe me.
Yep.
Yeah.
Trust me.
Well, I hopefully handled it with grace, because I said that because I speak as the voice of Boveda on all social media, and I said, well, As a matter of fact, we've consulted Charlie. He's assured us that was not his wife's Ducati scarf, and that he will make perfect wardrobe decisions in the future. So,
That's well played. Well played.
so
Right.
thank
Yeah.
you. So anyway, you can see the footprints in the Boveda pack, and so the folks that are taking them on planes, pressure's not a deal there because clearly they're not airtight because they're letting air in and out of them. So they don't have any concern. The only concern that they have is from hard or sharp impacts, from slamming it in a humidor door, from poking it with something sharp, that kind of thing. So this exactly what you're talking about has been trusted in literally millions of cigar boxes from Fuente, Padron, Rocky, La Flor Dominicana, and about 24 others. And they're right on top of the cigars in the cigar box, and there's no concern there. So use with confidence.
Yeah, no, like I said, I agree. I've traveled to Las Vegas sometimes 3 times in a year, right? And that's a great use case when you're traveling from Rhode Island in New England where I live, and you're going into the desert, right? And when you take your cigars on the plane, and I never check them, right? I always bring them with me on the plane. But I know, like, when I'm in New England, even in the summertime, like, it can be kind of cool on the plane. But I know, like, when I'm landing in Las Vegas, it's 100 degrees and it's super dry. And maybe when I'm leaving Rhode Island, like, it might be 80 degrees and 100% humidity. That's a huge change. And I'm putting it in there with my 30 count, cigar travel case. I'm putting it right on top of, like, really, premium cigars that I'm going to smoke when I'm on travel. I've gained confidence in the product over the years because I've never had an issue with that particular problem. So I'm going to back up what you say, Charles, from firsthand experience that it's a great product in that regard.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So I got a question. Go ahead, Charles.
No, I'm going to let you go for it, Will.
We got this question from the chat room, and it's a question that I hear a lot and get a lot, and it's about recharging Boveda packs. What are your thoughts on that? Is that something you advise for or against? Is it meant to do that? What's your opinion on that?
Well, listen, if people aren't buying Boveda, they're not supporting my dreams of being a ballerina. So if you're okay, no, here the candid response is that we invented Boveda to be free of all of the hassles that everything else has, right? So not only to outperform everything, but to be maintenance and activation free. So for me to suggest, hey, use this maintenance and activation free product and go through some hassles in order to recharge it, that's just not what we are. There is no question that when you expose Boveda to a humidity higher than the number on the pack, it's going to absorb moisture, okay? So if you have a method that works to recharge it, do it. I'd much rather that you're not ruining your cigars and that you're recharging Boveda packs and that you're trusting our product to do it and really trying to maximize your money. I think what people often find, though, is they go, gosh, yeah, I can do it, but how much time did that take me and what's my time worth? So if you have a method of doing it, do it. Boveda is two-way. It will absorb moisture. But I can't recommend a way, A, because, again, we designed it to be maintenance-free, and B, we haven't tried it because we designed it to be maintenance-free. So high humidity environment, wherever you can find that. I don't know if you take them in the shower with you. I don't know if you, I don't know I know some of the methods that people do, but if you have a way that does it and it works, great, because I'd rather you have great cigars instead of ruining your cigars.
I do take mine in the shower with me. They're great exfoliating properties of Boveda.
That's your skin is glowing. Really, it is glowing. Paul.
My beard, I rub them all in my beard. It's wonderful. I'm totally kidding. Charles, I want to ask you. Most of the questions that are more like problems with particular humidors tend to stem from the 25 to 50 count humidors that people are buying that are, in all honesty, lower quality humidors, but even some of the higher end, there are companies that put out really high quality 25 count to 50 count humidors that are Spanish cedar on the inside. But the people that are buying those kind of humidors are more like casual cigar smokers and tend to have a lot of issues with their cigars. And it's either one end of the spectrum or the other, right? Like, obviously, they're not perfectly humidified, so they're either really low on the humidity spectrum. I think more often than not, they're probably too high in the humidity spectrum because their 25 to 50 count humidor came with the puck or the block that has that stupid green foam in it, which we've trashed here on the show in the past and said never to use. They have problems with those cigars. From Boveda, what do you recommend people put in the 25 to 50 count humidors, and how often, on average, do they have to swap out their Boveda packs?
Yeah, well, we always say that a humidor is only as good as the moisture control device or humidification that you're using inside of it. So, for example, my LE Blue over there would not be a great humidor. It would look world class, but it wouldn't perform for my cigars the way I want with the puck in it. A Ziploc bag with a couple Boveda packs in it would be better cigars. Doesn't look as pretty sitting on or a Tupperware would be outstanding. And Tupperware is literally world class when it comes to moisture control.
Yep.
So it doesn't look as pretty sitting on your desk. So what I usually tell people is that ask, hey, I'm thinking about getting a 25 or a 50 count humidor. Well, if it's 25 count, I maybe say, you know what? Get our humidor bag instead. Get a large humidor bag, because that pack with cigars in it. So for people that don't know, it's a fairly large bag that has a 40-gram Boveda pack in it, and it's going to last a year. And so that is literally, you could lose that thing with cigars in it for a couple of years, and they'd be the best perfectly aged cigars that you've ever had. So maybe wait a little bit until you want to afford a little bit better humidor, because even though humidors are only as good as the humidification in them, the reality is that the Boveda packs won't last as long in a poorer quality humidor. So the life of any Boveda just depends on how hard it has to work. That's why in our original packaging, they've got at least a 2-year shelf life. I have another video from a couple weeks ago where I was changing the Boveda packs in our overflow cigars and came across some 3-year-old Boveda. I weighed them to find out how much moisture they'd lost through the packaging. They weighed exactly the same as a brand new Boveda. So we say 2 years, but that's very conservative. So that's Boveda working very efficiently in our packaging. That same Boveda in that package, if it were opened and closed daily, might only last a couple months, because it's got to get moisture back into the air after it's lost out of the package. So people could probably find that they would get twice the performance out of Boveda in a great humidor like an LE Blue versus something that is, there's some good stuff coming out of China. So that's not a knock, but if they got a bad China humidor that was really cheap, you might go, Boveda says 2 to 4 months. This is junk. Well, first I'd ask, did you season it properly? Because that's a critical step. And then 2, is the humidor sealing very well? Is it leaking through the walls very much? And so those are the only complaints that we get, that is that it's not lasting as long, and that's often because someone missed the step of seasoning. They just throw their cigars and some 69s in the box, and they call us and they say, holy crap, it's at 50% in my humidor. Yeah, because how long did you season it? How'd you do it? Well, I didn't. Well, that was the challenge, or that was the problem. So your life will depend on how hard they have to work. So the more efficient, the more airtight, the better. That's why we have flip-top Coleman coolers with a few hundred boxes of them in our storage room, and I change those about every almost 7, 8, 9 months.
Charles, you bring up a great point. I have 2 Coleman humidor coolers here that I've converted into humidors, and I think I've got a great strategy. And when people come to me and say, well, I'm running out of space, my 50 or 100 count humidor is full, I don't know what to do. What do I use for overflow space? How do I be able to store more cigars? And I'm like, look, for a really low cost, you can buy a cooler, some Ziploc bags, some Boveda packs, and even some Spanish cedar, right? Like you can buy Spanish cedar and you can create this fabulous humidor for really under $100, under a couple $100. I mean, it depends on the size of the humidor and the size of the cooler you want to buy. I've got 2 gigantic coolers here in the studio. They cost us, in reality, next to nothing. That I store probably 1,000 or more cigars in, and I'm using sheerly like Boveda packs. And like, if you find something else on sale and you want to throw it in as humidity for the winter, that's fine too. But I put Ziploc bags. I put like 25 cigars in each one. I stick a Boveda pack in it. I put some Spanish cedar in it. I throw a few more Boveda packs in the cooler. And that's fine. It's great. It works awesome. And you can size that to your budget and the number of cigars that you want to store. And we're going to do a giveaway this year where I'm going to build one of these cooler doors with Boveda packs, and we're going to give that away in the show because it's such an awesome way to store all your cigars. It doesn't look pretty, like you say, right? Like it's a cooler, right? But it's an awesome way to store cigars.
Listen, there is no shame whatsoever in doing it that way. None at all. You don't need to keep spending thousands of dollars on a bigger cabinet or those kinds of things. Those can be gorgeous, and I love them. And I've seen some really great ones out there that I would love to have. But if you're looking for max efficiency and stretching your cigar dollar the furthest, you just nailed it. Just cooler. Like I said, use one of our 60-gram packs per 25 cigars capacity in a wood humidor, but you can get by with 1 per 50 in a cooler, once again, because they seal better and the wood, there is no wood for the walls, so they don't leach moisture out of the walls. And oftentimes, the boxes themselves, if you leave them in boxes, that's wood itself. That's the kind of wood you want them close to. So you might find that you don't have to run out and source. And buy
I
cedar.
even find, Charles, that and I have some of the more expensive ones at home that look more like furniture, that do maybe temperature controlled. Some of them, I have one that's a smaller cabinet, one that's a larger cabinet. But I even find I put Boveda packs inside of that humidor as well, because there's variances from top to bottom, right? Humidity tends to fall. So at the bottom of my humidors tends to be higher humidity. At the top tends to be lower humidity. And Boveda packs are a great way. You throw them in a drawer, you throw them in a box, you throw them on the shelf. It tends to help regulate that humidity. So there's a use case there for it as well.
Absolutely, that's not uncommon. There's a guy on YouTube, Mr. Opus X. He might have one of the most impressive Opus X collections outside of the Dominican itself. And that's what he does too. It's got electronics to do the heavy lifting, because if a humidor gets to about 300 cigars or something like that, I truly tell people, listen, I would love your business, but I don't know if you've got the appetite to spend that kind of money every 2 to 4 months.
And Charles, I'll be honest with you, there's probably 1,000 cigars in each of my humidors at home, right? So you need something to really give that humidity. But for the fine tuning, Boveda works awesome.
Yeah. So for something that size, that's what I recommend. Use the Boveda pack to do the fine tuning, and make sure that you calibrate your hygrometer, because that's going to be your best friend in that scenario. Because again, just in case that electric unit happens to be giving off higher humidity than it should, you want to make sure that you detect that right away, because everyone knows, or most people would know, that a Boveda pack, as it dries out, is going to turn into a solid wafer when it's dead. So short of that, where there's very few soft spots, that's when you want to replace it. But when it gains everything that it can, it's still very soft. And the only way you can tell is by weighing it on a scale that can show grams, which nobody outside of drug dealers have.
And it's funny you say that, Charles. But what's interesting too is, if you're away from your home or whatever, if you lose power or your electronics fail in your humidor, if you have one of those large cabinets at home, if you have some Boveda packs in there, it gives you that extra assurance that there's going to be your cigars are going to be properly humidified for a couple of days or a week until you can restore power or fix the electronics in your humidor.
Yeah, and it's one of those things too where you don't think about it, you don't think about it, you don't think about it. Oh, I thought about it. I go and look at the reservoir. Crap, it's empty. How long's that been?
Yes, exactly. I'm kind of anal, and because I'm such a technology nerd, I have a home automation system, and I've got these little devices inside of my humidors that go to my home automation system to give me temperature and humidity. So if my humidors at home, they drop below a certain level, I get an alert on my smartphone.
Fantastic. Really fantastic.
It's great, and I don't want that to happen, right? But I know if I have Boveda packs in there, that's probably going to be less of an occurrence, or even if it does drop before a certain level, I've got some time because I got Boveda packs in there.
I've got people that go on trips, as you can imagine, that they have maybe second homes and they're going to be gone for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 months. They just literally take whatever they've got left in their 20-pack brick, or they put 5 or 6 extra ones in there, which is more than they would need, but still never dangerous. And so when they get back there in the spring, summer, or fall, they can their cigars are still perfect.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. Will, do you have some giveaways that we want to do for this segment?
Yeah, Charles gave us 10 packs of the Boveda. Got 10 packs of Boveda.
Nice.
I use these all the time. I put these in my travel humidor. I put them in Ziplocs when we send out prizes on Stogie Geeks. It's a camera. And these are great. And we have a bunch of these to give away to listeners. So, Paul, do we have a question or something we want to put?
Yeah, you're gonna put it on me, huh? You're gonna put me on the spot. So we'll do kind of leave it up to interpretation contest, Will.
Okay.
I want to hear from our listeners. What for you, like, what's the ideal temperature and humidity for your humidor? I'm curious to hear from our listeners. Like, what do you strive for in your humidors to be the ideal temperature and humidity? And that differs per person. Typically it's a range between 65 and 72, depending on, what your preference is. But what's your ideal? Like, what do you strive for in your humidors?
Yeah, email that to the show at stogiegeeks.com. We'll probably look at some of those answers and kind of recap them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great suggestion, Will.
Yeah, and I'd suggest your fans keep tuning in, because we'll make sure that you stay supplied in giveaway items. So when you're giving away 10 packs or other stuff, they aren't going to want to miss that.
No, absolutely. I mean, Paul and I make a lot of, like I said, we send a lot of cigars between Rhode Island and North Carolina, and we want to make sure that stuff is stabilized.
Yeah, we rely on Boveda for that, for sure.
Yep. It's kind of funny because I know sometimes we send the same bag, and then there's a point sometimes where, I see it kind of go down. I see the bag go back and forth sometimes.
That's right. So. Yeah, we reuse the same one for a while before it dries out, and then we got to replace it with a new one. So.
Yep.
That's okay. Do you guys separate your 2-ply toilet paper also into 1-ply, and then buy whole milk and pour water in it to make skim milk too?
My grandfather on my mom's side grew up in the Depression, and he instilled upon me to make sure that you use everything that you have to its fullest degree. And I take a part of me with that in my life. So that's where that stems from, Charles.
It's not a criticism. That's fantastic.
My wife gets after me. It's funny with food, right? Like, my wife hates leftovers, right? But I'm the kind of person, because of my grandfather, I'm like, whatever we have in the house for food, I'll figure out how to make something with the leftovers, or use up everything we have in the house. And I get that from my grandfather. And that's the kind of same thing what I do with Boveda packs, right? As much life as we can get out of the stuff is what we like to use. So,
my wife does the same thing. She gets nervous when I bring a pork chop to the office or something like that, and I don't eat it for a couple of days. Oh, honey, you're gonna get something. Darling, I'll be fine. So, I don't want to waste it.
Excellent, excellent. Will, any other question for Charles, or are we ready to move on to the next segment? We're in short on time here this week.
Yeah, I think we covered everything on that. I think we did cover everything.
Awesome. Charles, thank you very much for appearing on the Stogie Geeks. Wonderful having you. Humidification, especially this time of year, is very important. So,
Will, Paul, I can't thank you enough for the hospitality. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in, and make sure you get in touch with us in case you've got any questions or there's any way we can be of service.
Yep,
awesome.
And we'll have you back for sure, Charles, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Appreciate it, gents.
Take care.
And with that, we're going to take a short break, come back with our Debonair Ideal segment for this evening, so stay tuned. Don't go anywhere.